with Mile. I'm really looking forward to it, and what I'm especially looking forward to is the questions at the end of it. I think that makes a big difference in terms of actually answering the questions that people want to have answered. Okay, so just since we're talking about social media, it seems appropriate to try and connect with me on social media. So you're welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn. I know a few people connected with me last week. My Twitter account is @NikkiCreel, so you're welcome to tweet me. And if you want to use the hashtag #MileMadinah when you're on Twitter, just so that I know what you're talking about this webinar. So it'd be great to connect with you. Now, social media, the world's population is over 7 billion people. Of that, less than half have access to the internet. And of that section, 2.8 billion people are using social media. Now, of the social media, Facebook takes a big chunk of it with 2 billion active users, but obviously there's overlap because people very rarely just use one social media platform. So unless you've been hiding for the last 10 years, I think you must be aware that social media is really important, and it's very important to have a strategy for your business. Now, I've been doing social media and working with companies since 2010, so the last 7 years. And in that time, things have changed tremendously. Technology keeps on changing, the platforms keep on changing. You may feel, I don't know how many of you are actually working within social media, if you're responsible for social media, perhaps you would like to know more about social media. It would be useful if some of you can leave a little comment so that I can see where people are coming from, what your experience of social media is. So it can often feel very overwhelming with how do you keep up, how do you keep track of the latest trends, how do you react to everything. And I think it's really important to start with a strategy, and what people often talk of or speak of as strategy is actually tactics or a plan. Okay, so I've often seen social media strategy and all they're talking about is tactics, or this is how to write up a plan, or to put a plan together. A strategy is bigger than that, and I think it's important to start with the big picture. Okay, so if you've not got a strategy for your business, or perhaps you want to look at the strategy seriously to see whether it could be better, you need to start with the big picture. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the 5 big mistakes that I see companies making, and then look at some of the questions that you really need to ask yourself. We'll look at case studies to see how people are using it, because I think it's always good to get a bit of inspiration from people who are doing it well. And then I'll take you through my 10-step process for creating a social media strategy. Okay, so the first mistake that I see people making is they think that social media is a broadcasting tool. Okay, so very much like a newspaper, so that you put out content and then your readers or your audience is going to read it, or your potential customers, and you think of it as you putting out stuff there. Now, I mean, when I did marketing years and years ago, some decades ago, for a very, very big multinational company, the attitude was, it's like we will dictate what people say, but times have changed, and anybody with a smartphone in their pocket is a journalist and potentially can give you opinion. So your company is not all about what you say your company is, it's what other people think it is. So think less of being a newspaper and broadcasting out, because one of the key aspects which far too few companies do is listening. Most companies do not spend enough time listening on social media, so they're unaware of what their customers are actually saying. They're not paying attention to what's happening in the market. They're not paying attention to what the competitors are up to, because there's quite a lot of information there that you can find in that. But they're not responding to people, and it's through listening that you get the best opportunities. It's not about broadcasting, just putting your message out. It's actually paying attention. So instead of thinking of it as a newspaper, it's useful to think of social media as a conversation or a telephone. It's about communicating. It can help with the customer service. It helps with building business relationships. So for sales, I know social media tends to always fall under marketing's realm, but for sales, it is so powerful in terms of how it can build business relationships. It's great for market research. When I was in marketing, we used to have groups in a room, and you bring them in the room and you'd observe them, and then somebody would write out like a qualitative research for it. Qualitative research. Whereas if you actually pay attention on social media, there's so much information that's available, so you can actually find out a lot more by actually doing some number crunchings and analytics. Okay. The second mistake that I see is that companies are not prepared. So they sort of like, they haven't actually considered what may go wrong. Now, with social media, it's open 24 hours. And if something's going to blow up on social media, it is likely to blow up over the weekend. So when your social media team might not be working, or in the evenings, so it doesn't operate on a 9 to 5 operation. So you need to have a process in place for crisis communication. And I just want to show you, hopefully, well, not hopefully, but these images might look familiar to you. That United Airlines had an incident where they asked for volunteers on a plane, and one of their customers, when nobody came forth to be a voluntary person to come off the plane, they nominated people. And when somebody refused to go off the plane, he was literally dragged, and so he got injured in the process. But in days gone by, nobody would have really noticed, or maybe it would have made a little newspaper article, etc. But everybody on that plane had their smartphones out, so they were videoing it. And it's almost impossible, not to see. And if you look at the videos, you'll notice that how many smartphones are actually taking the images. So as it was happening, people were broadcasting that it was happening. Now, United Airlines didn't respond in the best possible way. They could have probably quietened it. It was a bad incident, but they took the side that their customer was wrong or a nuisance, which is possibly not the best approach to it. So there are lessons to be learned in how they did it, but you have to consider with your business, what are the crisis points, what things may go wrong, and how will you deal with them when they go wrong. I just want to show you another example. Now, this was a few years ago. HMW is a music outlet, a retailer in the UK, and their social media team was in a room as they were being fired. So they still had access to the social media accounts, and they decided to tweet. Once they knew they were being fired, they decided to use the Twitter account to tweet. Okay, it was really funny because I actually watched it on Twitter. They sort of used the hashtag HMV X Factor firing. So there are over 60 of us being fired at once, mass execution of loyal employees who love the brand. And then they talked about it. But at the top one, it says, just overheard a marketing director, East Lane folks, ask, how do I shut down Twitter? And the reason I want to use this example is quite often the leadership of companies do not understand social media. Far too many people in leadership positions think that you can shut down Twitter, that you can switch it off. And if you in that position, you really need to know how it is. And obviously, you should have a policy. The company should know who's got access to the social media accounts. And obviously, if somebody's going to be leaving the company, the rights to social media should have been removed before they got into that situation. So it's just a little bit of a warning. I know most of us found it really funny watching it, but the company obviously hadn't really considered the implications. Okay. So mistake number 3 that I see is inconsistency. Now, especially with big companies that have got lots of, say, different properties or different businesses, etc., quite often branding gets really mixed up. So if you go to the website and then you go to a Facebook page, it may look completely different, or a subsidiary company may not look anything like, it may look like somebody set it up or an intern has set it up. And quite often, company pages have been set up, or company accounts have been set up by somebody, some young person was working in the office who knew how to use Twitter or Facebook, and they thought, oh, it's a good idea for us to have a Facebook or Twitter account, and they've set one up. Okay, so if you look at a lot of companies, they quite often have lots and lots of accounts that are dormant, that the branding is not incorrect, etc. So you really need to have a thorough look at what your branding is about, but also like your tone and your voice. Is the persona the same? Like if you're on Twitter, is it the same persona as somebody on Facebook will get? Does it fit in with the company brand? I see a mistake that people make with customer service, where I've had companies where you can't get any customer service. So normally I would, and I think it's about 70% of people will normally complain in private first. And I've complained, I've filled in a form or sent the email, sort of that needed to be done, not had a good response, or had one of these Zen desks, which then said my problem had been resolved when it hadn't been resolved at all. And this went on for about 2 weeks. And eventually I thought, because I don't like necessarily complaining on social media, I went onto Twitter, and within 5 minutes, my problem was solved. Now, what's happening is more and more companies are solving problems quicker on social media than they're doing on through the other means that of customer service. What this teaches the customer is you need to complain in public. So it's not necessarily a good thing to encourage your customers to complain in public. But also I've looked at people's accounts, and there are questions from customers that are just unanswered. And you really need to make sure that everything, if you're going to do social media, you need to do it thoroughly, and you need to do it consistently, and you need to do it across all your brands. Okay, so mistake number 4 is no strategy. Okay, so this is where so often people set up Facebook accounts because you're supposed to have a Facebook account, and maybe they think, okay, it's important to get X number of likes on a page, so they go hell for leather for likes on a page, sort of get up to 90,000 likes or whatever statistic, and then wonder why it's not actually working. Okay, and it's because they've just jumped in because everybody says you need to be on social media. It's so easy. Almost every 5 minutes somebody tells you you need to be on a different platform, you need to be on a different account, you need to be doing this, you need to be doing that. And if you're swayed by everybody else's opinion, you don't have a strategy. Okay, so I just want to show you a good example of a strategy and just have a little talk about it, because just to make you think about it. This happened in the USA Super Bowl. The Super Bowl in the United States is probably one of the biggest sporting events. Okay, people spend an absolute fortune on adverts. So big companies will spend a fortune just to get their message out there. People tend to talk about the ads during the breaks as well. Well, in 2013, they had a 20-minute blackout. Now, nobody could have predicted that part of the arena was switched off, so the lights weren't working, they had to stop play, so they couldn't have play. Nobody knew what they were doing, sort of like it was completely quiet. There was this hold on everything. Now, nobody could have predicted that because it never happened, and it's never happened since. But the Oreo social media team reacted fast, and they came out with this power out, no problem. You can still dunk in the dark. Okay, so they took the opportunity of there being a power out to put a little picture together, etc. this is the ad that everybody's talking about, and it's not, they didn't actually pay for it, you know, because it's not, it's a tweet. It got traction, and it got traction beyond that. It got mentioned on the news, on, you know, through the media. It's been blogged about, etc. They've got so much traction for this. Now, this didn't just happen, okay? This isn't just somebody who's sitting on the social media team who had a spark of inspiration, you know, in the situation. This actually took 2 years worth of planning. The marketing director has said it took 2 years planning to do this spontaneous tweet. And what that means is the team, as well, the Oreo has very strong branding. Their social media team know exactly what tone of voice. They'd have like all the sort of pictures available. They know what type of things were acceptable to say, not acceptable to say, and they would have the authority to actually put something like this out. If you think about an ad, if you were to do an ad, it has to go through a whole process of legal teams and people signing it off in the company. Now, if you've got a 20-minute gap, you cannot come up with an idea and then ask the CEO for his permission, or the marketing director for their permission to send out something like this. So basically, it looks spontaneous, but that's by being prepared and actually having a social media strategy, knowing exactly what the voice of the company is, having a plan. They had a team there ready, waiting. They must have gone through some situations that could have happened. Okay. And then the big mistake is not measuring. Now, the interesting thing is people are asking the question of, you know, how do you measure the return of investment on social media? But far too often people are measuring the wrong things. So they're getting caught up with what I call vanity metrics. So those are things like how many likes you got on the page, how many followers you got on the page, things like engagement, how many people interacting, even things like virility, or if things going viral. That's about ego rather than necessarily business. What you really need to do is focus on what money is it bringing in for a company. How do you connect what you're doing on social media with a commercial value or a marketing value, or the big picture? So what is the benefit of it happening? What is, so if you're doing social selling and you get sales through it, there's a return on investment in that. If you want to gather leads or get people to watch a demonstration of your software product, you need to be measuring things that are worth measuring for your company, not necessarily what is easy to measure on social media. There's also another aspect of this, is that depends on your company, because a lot of companies, some companies, everything happens online, so everything's e-commerce, and those companies, it's very easy to track what the impact of social media is. But quite often people track the last touch. So there's a number of touches that people might have. So they might find out about your company when they're interested. They maybe find a blog that you've written, or an article you've written about something, when they're doing some research because they're interested in buying, or they're considering vendors, or whatever the consequences are. And then, so they might see that. They might see it via, say, Twitter. They, you know, they may have an interaction with somebody, they may talk to other people. So it's actually making sure that you measure all the points of contact that can be attributed to social media, but also have some way of being able to see, is there benefit? Is there benefit to your actions? And, you know, what's the difference of doing social media? It's not just about having a conversation. Okay. Also, with social media, you have a lot of information that's available right there in the moment. And I suppose the question I'd ask you is, would you drive a car just looking through the rear view mirror? Okay. And quite often, that's what people do, is they're only looking at data in retrospect. So they're not necessarily reacting to things, they're not measuring things. So maybe once a quarter or once a month or maybe 6 weeks or whatever, you get a report, you look back at it and there's not much you can do about it. Whereas if you're actually monitoring and measuring activity, you should be able to notice when there's a blip, when there's like a spur of interaction on a particular post, and boosting an advert in that time would give you far bigger dividends than if you wait for the month end and for the report to come in before you actually do any reaction to the metrics. And so it's the data. There's a lot of data, and we're fortunate now. When I first did marketing, there are things like, you know, billboards, and you have to estimate how many people possibly could see it. Now, it's not an exact science, because if people driving, they might drive past, but they might not necessarily have seen your billboard. I know with magazines, there was an estimate that, you know, six people read each magazine, I think it was. How do you know? That's a guess, and that those guesses have been in place for quite a few decades, okay? Whereas on social media, it's a lot more measurable. The thing is to make sure that you're measuring the right things. Okay, so let's look at some questions that you need to be asking. Okay, always start with why on social media. Okay, so why are you going to use social media? Okay, what difference is it going to make to your business by using social media? If there's no difference, if the only plan is to be on social media for the sake of it, don't do it. Okay, switch off your accounts, don't do it. You need to have a strong why. Always start with why. It's the most important question that you can ask. So, you know, what's the point? Are you trying to drive awareness? Is it sales? Do you want to build loyalty? There's so many statistics that loyal customers cost less money, substantially less money to keep a customer than to acquire new customers. I think it's, you know, sort of like 6 times as much to acquire a new customer than keep a customer. A lot of people not spending enough time and effort in that department. So have a think about what's the point of using social media? You know, what is the big thing that you want? It has to fit in with a business objective. Okay, you also need to know what your one thing is. What makes you stand out from your competitors? What makes you unique? Why would people use your company versus other companies? So it's having that branding in place and understanding what your business is all about. And then, and people don't spend enough time asking the who question. I really think, and I like to do workshops with people across different departments of a business, because often people will say, oh yes, we market to people from 35 to 60, and say they might give male, female, they might give a salary thing, etc. That doesn't tell you who that person is. You really need to know who your customer is. You need to know what their problems are. You need to know what keeps them up at night. And if you haven't done it yet, you need to have some customer personas. Now, sometimes they're called avatars as well. So these aren't cartoon characters. These are, so you get a real flavor for the type of person that you want to market to or that you want to reach. And the clearer you are about who it is that you want to reach, the easier it is. And with social media, the clearer you are, there are ways to target that specific person. And that will change the type of content that you'll put out. It might change which platforms you put that you're doing your social media from. Okay, so your who is so important, and part of the who is your customer decision journey. Now, I've used a very simplified process. This is showing a linear one that people move through a stage of having to be aware of your business before they can actually consider you. You know, so then they also have to have an interest. They'll have a process of evaluating. They'll make a decision, take an action, and then hopefully refer. You know, sort of give a referral and build loyalty. Now, the customer decision journey is actually more circular, and McKinsey has got a very interesting article about the customer buying journey. So I've just simplified it because obviously I'm limited into how much depth I can go into for this, but you have to understand your customer's buying journey. What is it that they need to do? What are the questions they ask? What do they look at when they come to your website? What articles do they read? What are they interested in? Okay. And part of the who question is where did your audience hang out? Now you really need to know who your audience is to be able to answer this question, because you want to fish where the fish are. Okay, there's no point, say, if you like Facebook and your social media team likes Facebook and your customers don't. So like, let's say your customers are in China, Facebook doesn't operate in China. Okay, you'd be wasting your time having a Facebook account if you're targeting Chinese people. Okay, so that's just like a dramatic display. If your target is young people, you really need to be considering Snapchat. But if you've got an older demographic, Snapchat might not be that important for you. If you're business to business, LinkedIn is an obvious platform to be using. So I'm just giving you a little brief, you know, sort of to show off that you might use different platforms depending on your strategy and depending on your business and where your customers might be. And then, of course, the rise of messaging apps. So people are talking WhatsApp, incredibly popular, Weibo, people using it. So is it social networks or is it messaging apps or is it a combination of each? And Facebook Messenger has, I think, about 1 billion users. WhatsApp is over 1 billion. We're talking big numbers, okay? So people using different ways of talking. And this one is about measuring, really. It's like, how will you know? Okay, how will you know if you've been successful? And it's a good question to ask because is having X number of likes, what does that show, you know, on a page? Does that show you anything for your business? So you want to know how you will know when it's successful. What are your KPIs that you're using to measure social media? What are judgments? So they may not all be directly X amount of traffic. Some of it might be branding, but you need to have a clear idea of how you will know when things are working. Okay, this is just a simplified one that I use to show businesses because I think it makes it easier, is the steps that you might need. When you start on social media, you'll need to set up a foundation. You need to, at some point, build up an audience. So yes, you will need to get how many likes, and you'll be after followers on Twitter and things like that. And yes, you do want to engage because there's no point in just having X number of likes if nobody's talking. Okay, and engagement is good because you're interacting. Okay, but it needs to do something, and ideally you want traffic. So the traffic might be to a website, the traffic might be to your telephone lines, it might be to, if you've got a retail outlet, to your actual store, it might be footfall, and ultimately you want to do something for your business. So it's not about, you know, sort of building an audience or getting engagement. It's actually, how is this working for your business? Okay, there's a lot more questions that you can ask, and I think it's important to ask questions. And I think as a guide, your questions you always need to ask are why, what, where, when, how, and who, of course. So just make sure that you ask those questions and just get into the habit of asking questions, and so that you can really flesh it out until you feel that you really know where you're going to go with this. Okay, so I wanted to show you a case study. I think I've did a bit of research in the Marriott International group of hotels. They've got 6,100 properties around 127 countries, I think it is. And a few years ago, so this is just in the last 4 years, so they've changed what they were doing in the last 4 years quite dramatically. They wanted to build a global brand. So they wanted to unify the marketing teams for all their companies. They've got obviously a lot of different hotels under Marriott International, and they wanted to make sure that they were consistent about what they were doing across the globe. They also wanted to allow their digital marketing division to act and react much faster. And they've got a process of using what they call the 3 C's. So they wanted to scale content, so get economies of scale, so doing it across the globe, obviously. They wanted to build a strong community, so the content and the community was closely linked, and they wanted to make sure that it all linked to commerce. Okay, so what is the difference that their social media is making, or the content is making, to the bottom line, to revenue, to bookings? So all those things which are important for businesses. Okay. So what they did was they built something called a their content studio and MLive, okay? And they've got physical brand newsrooms around the world. And they use content marketing technology to connect global teams. Now, the content studio has done things, and they're producing like almost mini movies. So if you Google, if you haven't seen the Marriott's mini movie, and it's worth just having a look, they've got something, the series called The Two Bellmen, and they, I think the shortest one is about 20 minutes, and the last one is about 35 minutes. So they're quite long. They're not ads. There's not product placing within the ad, but obviously they're promoting it. They're promoting the company, but it's aimed at the younger generation. So they're slightly quirky, and they're not all about the properties at all, but give the feel of what their properties might be. And one of their films called The French Kiss, which is set in Paris, they did a promotion with the launch of it, and it generated 500,000, so $500,000 worth of hotel bookings. Now, the MLive studio, it's like going into a control room. So they have 5 of them, or they got 4 at the moment. They're going to have a 5th built very shortly. And they've got one in America, dealing with America, USA and Canada. Another one in in Florida in America, which is for the Caribbean and South America, Latin America. They've got one in Asia, in Hong Kong. They've got one in London, which deals with Europe, and they're going to be building one, I believe, in Dubai very shortly, which will be for the Middle East. So they can see in the various time zones and use the languages that they need to use, be aware, so they've got more local knowledge within that, okay? And they're placed in the lobby of the headquarters, and they really want to look at millennials, people who are using their smartphones all the time, and they want to be flexible and able to react quickly, and have real-time content and with real-time conversations. And for example, somebody was swimming in a swimming pool, and this person was a travel blogger or vlogger, and they sent him some personalized towels, which obviously he then shared on Instagram and things like that. So they've reacted, and I just wanted to show you an opportunity they found. Something was trending, so okay, I'm just going to, I'll come on to that in a minute. Just realized it. I would just want to show you what they track. Okay, so they're tracking conversations, global performance, marketing campaigns, their brand reputation, so what the sentiment is, editorial content, real-time booking information, so they've got a commercial value to it as well, with their website traffic, and they've got a reward system, so they want to see how many reward sign-ups they can get from doing specific things, okay? So this is the example I wanted to show you. Okay, they noticed something on board Panda that people were talking about. It was a New Zealand backpacker who was going around with something. Lego had a little figurine, or has a little figurine called the backpacker. And he was going around with the backpacker, and wherever he was staying, he was taking pictures of the backpacker in various surroundings. So they noticed that people were talking about it. So they found out where he was and offered him a night to stay. So he stayed in a luxury hotel, and you know, of course, he shared his pictures, and he actually took a few pictures while he was there. So he took some pictures on there. So they were amplified to his followers, but also Lego picked it up and then amplified it as well. So that the cost of the hotel room is relatively small compared to the extra attraction that they got from doing that. And there's loads of different examples of how, you know, they've listened into somebody saying that they were having, you know, planning a night, you know, they wanted hotel recommendations. So not only did they give hotel recommendations in the city that they wanted to be in, but they also told them what other things they could do. So things like nightlife things they could do, places to eat, and added extra value. And that was a tweet that somebody sent, and that particular tweet, 13 minutes later, the person had booked into the Marriott hotel. Okay, what they do, which is quite clever, is they use something called geofencing technology, and it's quite amazing what you can do. So literally, they have gone around, there's over 6,000 properties they've done this with, and they've created a virtual boundary around their property. So so they're using GPS and other digital markers to create almost a fence around a property. So if somebody tweets or does a public tweet on Instagram, which invariably is public, Weibo, which is invariably public, or a public Facebook page, even if they do not hashtag any of the company's hashtags or mention the company, they can actually see that and they will react to it. So it's not only when people are using the at mention, or you know, if it's mentioning them online, that they can contact them, or they're listening to it, because what they wanted to do was to be able to react to their customers while they were actually at the property. So not after they've left, but while they're in the situation. And they have a policy of surprise and delight. So every now and then they give treats to people who've shared something while they're in their property. And it's led to a very positive reaction. It's led to greater engagement, and there are definitely commercial benefits that they've seen and they've been able to see through doing this, because they are tracking everything. Okay, so let's look at the 10-step process. I am aware that I'm not going to spend that long on it and go in too much detail, because I do want to get to answer your questions. So, okay, if we look at the 10-step process, the first thing is you need to do a social media audit and review, okay? You really need to know where you are with your social media. I'm assuming that most of you have started on social media, or have a social media account, or somebody's doing social media. So you would need to start with an audit and a review, okay? So it's looking at the numbers of exactly where you are at. And you also want to understand your customer and your buying journey. So you need to have, you know, you need to make sure you've got a brand persona, or you've got an avatar, or whatever label you want to call it. You need to understand your buying journey. You need to know at what points people are in contact. You know, are they speaking, you know, sort of customer service? What are all the points that customers might have when they contact your company? Okay, what are the touch points? And then you want to set your objectives in line with your company's objectives. So it has to match what your company wants to do. And if your company does not have written objectives for, let's say, the next year or whatever, hopefully you've got some marketing objectives that you can match, but it needs to tie in with business, okay? And you want to have SMART goals, so that's specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, relevant, and timely goals. And you want to know what your KPIs are, okay, so that you can measure for. You want to identify obstacles. Quite often we forget that there might be problems along the way, okay, so it's useful to go, okay, this is where we are, this is where we want to get to. So what's stopping us from getting to where we want to get to? Okay, so it's identifying those obstacles. And it might be senior management. It may be lack of resources. And once you've looked at the obstacle, look at what additional knowledge and skills and resources you need. You know, sort of, because often there might be gaps. You might need to recruit somebody. You know, you might need inspiration. If you want to use employee advocacy, you need to make sure that all your employees, there's a policy in place and they have adequate training so that they know what's acceptable and what's not acceptable to do, okay? And then you want to create a written strategy. It needs to be in writing. There's no point in it being in one person's head, because the strategy has to be more than just the person who's written it. And it obviously, if it's a smaller business, that might be a simple document. For a larger business, that might have to include lots of things like company policies, crisis communication plans, and all sorts of things in there, and processes. So you might have a customer service process that you follow, etc. Okay, you then would create a plan, and that's actually getting down to it. You know, what's going to happen when. Implement, and then whatever you do, you need to measure what you're doing. You need to continuously analyze and improve what it's working at. Your strategy will need to be reviewed, you know, every, say, or looked at, you know, once, at least once or twice a year. But it should be in place more than the tactics that you might use. But you know, that can be part of it as well. But whatever you do, you need to be measuring, analyzing, and improving what you're doing. Okay. So right. So this is my fun part that I enjoy doing. So it's over to questions. I'm hoping that you've got some nice questions for me. I'm looking forward to them. And yes, I'm ready when you're ready.
All right, thank you very much, Iggy, for a very interesting presentation. And folks, we are open for question and answers. If you have any questions, you could either put it or insert it into the question box, or you could equally raise your hand. There's a hand icon available on your console, and you click on it if you want to ask any questions to the speaker. But let me go to the question box. There are a couple of them. I think the first one, how to set social media goals that align with overall company goals?
Okay. Well, basically, you need to make sure that what your company, there's no point in going for, you know, like we want to get people chatting, or we want to have a viral video, and I've seen far too many people going, well, how do we make a video viral, you know, as though that's a business goal. It's not a business goal. Many of the viral videos do not actually have a benefit to a business. So it's really looking at what's already available there, you know, what is written down, what, you know, what is the goal for the company? You know, sort of like a lot of company will say, okay, we want to grow, you know, if we want to grow customers, or we want to increase our sales, or whatever. If that's one of the business goals, then you want to make sure that your social media is aligned with that. So if it's just that, like if sales is a big thing, or if you want to get people, you know, more people having a demonstration, more inquiries, then those are the goals that you should be setting. Okay. Does that make sense?
We have another one from Aya Jibril. The question is, do you recommend using automated posting websites like Hootsuite, etc.?
Okay. I think in this day and age you need to use some form of automation, but the danger is when everything becomes automated, it becomes very impersonal and irrelevant. So what's happened on Twitter is that people have automated to such a process that they're automatic responses. So somebody follows you, there's people have automated a direct message which says thank you for the follow, or and it actually means nothing because nobody's actually talking to anything. Sometimes you can catch automations out because they'll go into a loop and thank you for liking the thing or thank you for responding, when you're actually just making an issue of the fact that they're automated. But your life is too short to spend every single minute on social media. So I think you need to have a certain amount of content that's scheduled, okay? So that no matter what happens, content goes out. You do need to know, like if there's a big crisis, you need to be able to switch that scheduling off, okay? Because there's nothing worse than if there's a big crisis and you tweet something that it doesn't show, you know, compassion for what has happened. So there's a place for scheduling and there's a place for automation. But where you're going to get, and especially in sales and customer service, that, you know, it's when you build relationships with people, that's where the real strength is. It's when you have trained your staff or employees to the point of giving them the authority and responsibility that they can react. That's when you start bringing in more business, because people can interact on so many different levels. So never underestimate the power of the human touch. Of, you know, like it's like, with people do business with people, and you need to get to know people and like it. And a company, people don't do business with a company, they're actually doing it with the people within the company. And so I think the danger of automation is setting things on autopilot and then forgetting about it. So I always advise you want that human touch, and if you there's no substitute for being human. Okay.
All right, we have another question from Mr. Ajuma Onekiver. The question is, what about us who render services like those in public or government sectors? Do we need a social media presence? If so, how do we manage and what you recommend?
Sorry, can you read that? I didn't hear the first part of it. For example, what were they saying?
Sorry. The caller also has raised a hand, so let me see. Hello, Ajuma. Can you hear us?
Hello.
Please ask the question. Introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Ijoma. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay, I really enjoyed your presentation, but my question now is this: for those of us in public sector, we render services, right? Yeah. Like people in the government establishment, do we really need a social media platform? If yes, how do we go about it, and how do we manage it?
Okay, I do think you need a social media platform. Obviously, this is why it's really important to have to be aware of your social media strategy, or having a set strategy. I think we've seen, I mean, the President of the United States may have won his election based on his social media presence. Okay, so social media can be very powerful. So I think it's worth, obviously, public sector. It's very important. You've got a persona, even if it's saved in cost for customer service. For somebody answering the phone, because social media, and especially Twitter, is exceptionally good for cutting costs. I think it's 20 times less. I've seen different statistics for how much sort of is less that it costs to be able to respond on Twitter. And if you look at things like airlines, a lot of their customer service is done on Twitter. So it's worth thinking about it, even if it's just for customer service, of how you can use it. But have a look at what other examples of governments around the world are doing, and look at other categories that aren't related, to see if there's something that you can glean from other industries. But I do think it's worth having a presence, because you should at least be monitoring what people are saying about you. And even if you're not necessarily broadcasting, it's worth listening to the conversations that people are having. to see how you can make improvements, to see where the needs are, what the requirements are. Does that make sense to you?
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Gemma.
Great question.
Asking the question. Let me go another caller who has raised a hand. We have Brother Muhammad Ismail. Brother Muhammad Ismail. Could you please introduce yourself and ask the question?
Hi, this is Muhammad Ismail, and I'm working in branding and communication. My question is, how to convince a social person? He's very social, but he is on social media. That social media really matters to them, their brand, and that it will create business or bring customers to them.
Okay.
For example, let me just elaborate. If you have Mr. Ogilvy, the late Ogilvy, the Ogilvy now today, how to convince them that social media is a thing today?
Okay, I think it's unless people are hiding away, I think there's a lot of fear. What age is this person? Because quite often people are scared of changes, or they feel overwhelmed by it, or they don't see the value of it. I think the way to convince people to use social media is there has to be a financial benefit or a business reason for doing it. Okay. So it's actually proving that it's not just about chatting, not just about conversations, but that actually it's generating business. So I would look at business, look at case studies in similar fields. There's quite a lot, online that you can find as a way of convincing them. There's a really good book that somebody's written for, I think it's called The Social Executive. Dion Lewis, I think his name is. If you send me a tweet or connect with me on LinkedIn, I'll give you, I can give you her details or the details of the book.
Thank you very much.
And she does.
Sorry.
She
goes
through yeah.
Hello. Sorry. Is there a way to, calculate the ROI on social media?
Okay, it depends. Okay, there's no set plan. Obviously, you've got your costs of how much it costs to run social media.
Yes.
So that's obviously your staff, your overheads, the costs of using platforms and things like that, advertising costs, etc. So you have your costs and you have your return. Okay, and it's connecting it, but actually connecting. So obviously, if you're a PR person, you will have different goals and you want to measure different things than if you are, say, a salesperson. Okay, so it's knowing what you want to measure. So you need to start with what is it that how will you know if it's working, and what are your objectives? What is the main goal for it? Okay, because sort of like I suppose with advertising, if with Facebook, a lot of them will give a good return on investment, and those are fairly easy to calculate because you're spending X amount of money. But obviously, if you're just trying to build engagement, that's not measurable. But if you are trying to see how many leads it generates, then that is measurable. If you're trying to see how many people it takes to a certain page, maybe gets them onto a list of people or subscribing, that's measurable. Okay, so it's taking what your big goal is and then working out how you're going to do something that is measurable. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Brother Muhammad. I know we have a few more people who raised their hands, so let me go. We have Sabina Pierce. Sabina, could you please introduce yourself and ask a question? And would appreciate a quick question as we are short on time. We have a number of other questions.
All right. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Can you hear me, ma'am?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Yeah. Once again, I want to appreciate your effort so far. It's been very clear and comprehensive as well. However, I want to ask a question.
Yes.
What do you think about having a social, we've been talking about social media platforms between an organization and its customers, an organization and its foreign external partners. What about social media platforms for members of the same organization?
Okay, there's internal ones like Yammer that people will respond inside. So you're talking about, I suppose, intranet or conversations. Quite often companies will use, say, WhatsApp, or they will have Slack groups. I don't know if you come across Slack, which I quite like, for teams to be able to talk and interact. So what is your question about the internal social media in companies?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, I can, yes.
What I said is that social media platforms and regulations for staff of an organization.
Yeah.
That's what I'm asking. What's your opinion about that? Because from the beginning, we've been talking about how to relate to customers, how to grow our businesses using social media platforms. So is there any way that social media platform for staff of the organization can also help that, you know?
Okay, so, sorry, I'm not too sure that I understand the question. So I'm going to just try to clarify. So,
yeah.
Okay. So
okay. Let me say it again, ma'am.
Yeah.
Let me say it. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Yes.
Fine. What I said is this: we've been dwelling on social media platforms, you know, and management between our organizations where we work and our customers.
Yeah.
Our target markets.
Yeah.
You understand? Try to create a presence for them.
Yeah.
Now, we cannot have this now without having our own social media platforms for our staff. How we can communicate within ourselves. What do you think? So now I'm saying, having learned so much about, you know, the social media usage management and how to, you know, grow our businesses in terms of relating between the relationship between the organization and its clients, external clients, like the target markets and other partners. I'm talking about now, what do you think about the organization having a social media platform and regulation also for its staff?
Well, I think it's really important to have a means of communicating. I think people prefer to use social media because it's instant. I know my teenagers, well, my teenage son uses Snapchat a lot, just because he's messaging in private, and they'll have a lot of conversations. People will find a way to talk to each other. So I think it's worth, you know, working at streamlining ways that people can talk within the company. And obviously, if are you talking within people doing social media for the company, or are you talking generally with the staff?
For the staff.
Okay. Now, I mean, there's always something that people get very concerned about, is how staff are using their time while they're in work. So I think it's important to have a policy in place in terms of, so it's quite clear of what's acceptable, and because you don't want somebody not working because they're spending all the time chatting to other people in the company. But where it facilitates sort of work being done, facilitates communication within the company, then I think it's really important. And there are good platforms like, I don't know if you've heard of Slack, which is it helps with time management and teams. You can put teams together that you can talk to each other and interact with each other. Obviously, WhatsApp group, Yammer is another one that you know, a lot of companies use within that. Or some companies will actually have their own internal social media one that's bespoke and that's built for them. So I think people want to talk. So the easier you make it for people to talk and communicate with each other, the better. And that's, you know, sort of like, yeah, sort of that's how I see it. So yeah, has that answered your question? I'm not too sure. You know, sort of, I have a feeling that there's a more specific reason for this question that I don't quite know this yet. So has it been helpful?
Abina, thank you very much for asking the question. As we're really pressed on time, so I might have to just take one last question. But I request other questioners or callers to please get back to Nikki on the illustrated contact details on the webinar slide. So let me go to one last question from Amina. Okay, the question is, what tips do you have for effectively managing social media for a company remotely? Do you think managing a company's social media account away from the actual office can be successful?
Oh yes, very definitely. There's with technology, there's no reason necessarily for you to be in the office, you know, at a set place. So with platforms like Hootsuite, or I'm more familiar with Hootsuite, but obviously there are a lot of other social media management tools. It's quite easy for teams to work together, and especially if you're using something like Trello or Asana to communication for project management, so that everybody knows where everybody is at a particular point in time. The trend is towards social media being remote. I know I'm speaking at Social Media Examiner's Social Media Marketing World next year, and their social media management, they've got people around the world doing the social media management for them. There's nobody really sitting in the office. Some of them in the States, somebody's in Belgium, and they've got people around who will take over things at different time zones, so they cover it that way.